streaming, so it will take.
Quando vuoi.
Okay. Good afternoon, buon pomeriggio. Welcome back to another session of our book presentation. As we were saying before, a very colorful one and animated as well. So, definitely a live show for today, which we are extremely happy about. Of course, you can mostly find, if they're not all gone, which some are, our book at the Filmfair, or at least the information how to get them. Most of them are very brand new. So we are very excited, of course, to have them here. And let's start with a beautiful book with Sutton, which we are very, very happy to have here. Extremely happy. And it's a beautiful, in many ways, book of Richard Williams and Sutton. I say beautiful because it is colorful and full of. It is an autobiography, but there is a lot of beautiful art, of course, inside. And I also, in any points and any details, which I really appreciate. For example, the 4 words that I thought was particularly nice. But please, Mo, tell us about a little bit.
So we've got. Can you hear me? Is that okay?
Paolo?
Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. We've got sort of limited time, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about why it was written, how it was written, and what's in it for you in a matter of 15 minutes. And then Paolo's going to nudge me when I'm running out of time, and we're going to screen Prologue, which is the last finished film that Dick made and was nominated for an Oscar and a BAFTA, which runs for 6 minutes. And then I think there may be time for a few questions, but that's sort of roughly what we're going to do. So to start, why it was written. Many of you may know about the Animator Survival Kit, which was the original book that Dick wrote over 20 years ago, which is basically a book of principles of how to animate, which he, and at the beginning, there's a bit of history about animation, and there's a bit about some of the great animators that he both knew as friends and worked with, from the old Disney and Warner Brothers studios, who were still alive when Dick was working. And that book became a sort of Bible for animators all over the world. It's in many languages. And the question is, why did we do another book? So what happened was, over the years, a lot of young animators would say to Dick, oh, tell us stories about the old guys and so on. And the last 10 years of his life, he ended up with a studio at Aardman in Bristol, Aardman Studios in Bristol, where he was working on various things, including Prologue. And he used to go at lunchtime. He didn't eat at lunchtime, but he'd go and have a hot chocolate in the canteen. And he loved talking with all the young animators there who were all working on Aardman projects. And and they'd say, oh, tell us some stories and so on. And why aren't you writing this down? We'd love to have a book. And of course, it was sort of niggling around in his brain. And I think in the end, he decided that this was something worth doing. And we decided right away, we worked together for 35 years. We collaborated on various projects. And we decided this book we would do very much together. What had happened with the first book was that he'd done all the stuff about how to animate, which is very long and complex, and it's a big book if you've got it. But he'd also written some chapters, basically doing a sort of chapter on each of the great guys he'd worked with, like Art Babbitt and Ken Harris and Milt Kahl. And he did a sort of little bio of them, but also about his relationship with them and all the things he'd learned from them. And he wanted that to go into the original book. Both the editor, the marvellous Walter Donahue at Faber Books, and I thought that was really material for another book. but how to dissuade Dick. So one day at breakfast, when we were having our boiled eggs, he seemed in a good mood. So I said, listen, those chapters on the old guys, they're marvelous, but they're not for this book, they're for another book. And Dick gaily said, sure, just agreed right away. So all that material was put to one side. So when it came to thinking about writing a book, which would be more of a memoir about growing up in Canada, realizing age 4 when he saw Snow White that these were drawings and that they were animated. And I think also realizing that he was an artist, funnily enough. His mother said when he saw Snow White, when it came out, the original Snow White came out, she said he was never the same again. So he understood that he said all the kids thought that the dwarves were real, but he knew that they were drawings. And so in the book, he begins by talking about when he was young. There's some amazing animation when he was a kid that's in the book. There's lots of illustrations in the book about his life, and then it moves on through to his teenage years when he started doing commercial art. His stepfather worked at a commercial art studio, and they didn't tell people that it was a 14-year-old doing their adverts for them. And so Dick earned a bit of money and decided he wanted to go and visit Disney Studios, which was a four-day trip on Greyhound buses, day and night. And he ended up walking outside the fence at Disney and eventually got in. And they realized there was this young kid who'd come all this way, and they made it a bit of a PR story, a bit of publicity for them. And he got to meet all the animators that he knew about. Incredibly, even at that young age, he could recognize each individual animator's work on the screen. So if he was looking at a Warner Brothers short, he could tell it was by Ken Harris, which the animators thought was extraordinary that he could, but he could. Funnily enough, on that trip, he met Walt Disney with Bing Crosby. And he said it was really weird because he met him and talked to him, but that wasn't the important thing to him. The important thing was meeting the animators. That's what he was interested in. And it wasn't till his brother found a whole load of letters home fairly recently when they said, did you realize you met Disney? And he went, oh, I forgot that. So he was really interested in the work. And he went to art school, but he never graduated because he decided that he wanted to do more fine art at the end. He wanted to do more life drawing. And they said, if you change course, we won't give you a degree. So Dick actually, it was very funny. We did a census in the UK in 2011. And I remember asking him, what are your qualifications? Because they wanted on the form. And he absolutely had not a single qualification, which is very, very telling. So the book goes through how he set up a studio, his first film, The Little Island, and then all the other films that he made. But it also has these chapters interspersed where he talks about the animators he met, what they gave him, all the knowledge he got from them. And their particular the particular things that they taught him. So it's both a memoir, but it's also for animators or students or even film historians. It's got some really interesting stories about their histories and how they got into animation. And in a sense, Dick has become, I think, the bridge between the golden age of animation in the 30s and 40s and the golden age that began again, really, when CG and films like The Little Mermaid and also Who Framed Roger Rabbit took off in the late 80s, 90s, when animation suddenly went into boom, and everyone was doing animation. So Dick became a kind of linchpin of the art form. importantly, I think about Dick is one, that his generosity, that he wanted to give this knowledge out to everybody, to as many people as possible. And when he did masterclasses with Art Babbitt in London, which would have been in the late 70s, early 80s, he not only closed his studio every morning for a month, so everyone working at the studio was invited to come to the masterclasses. He also invited his competitors in Soho and London. And that, to me, when I first heard about that, I was astonished. And the reason was that he wanted the craft to get better. He wanted to move the craft forwards. And that's a very important thing about Dick. And if you look at the history of his films, and, you know, he goes into it in the book, you actually see the way his work developed the craft. At every film he did, he moved the craft forward, including with Prologue at the end of his life, which you're going to see. So he made a huge contribution to the art form, but also to the education of people in animation. And I think it's quite rare. When we went to the Annecy Animation Festival, which we often did, and they used to have book signings and things, and Dick loved it when people came up with the original book, and it was all kind of grubby from use. You know, he wanted the books to be used, and he was constantly being thanked by people, and I think it's quite a rare thing for an author to be thanked all the time for the way in which a book has perhaps changed someone's life, which it certainly did in Dick's case. How the book was written is important because, unfortunately, as you probably know, Dick died in 2019, and he was planning to do the book like the original book, all handwritten in his block writing. So in the book, we've got 22 completed design pages by Dick. And then I had to sort of take over and pull lots of notes, films, conversations we'd had, conversations he'd had with the animators. A lot of material had to be pulled together to sort of basically take us through his life. And then towards the end of the book, I actually take over with writing, because I then tell the story of how we worked on The Thief and the Cobbler, which some of you may know about, which was taken away from us at a certain point, and what happened next, and how we went to Canada, and how we started doing masterclasses, and how the thief was saved, actually by someone in this room at the back, Randy Haberkamp. Sorry, I'm a bit emotional about that. And also the artwork was saved by the Academy, also thanks to Randy. So Dick in his foreword, which you mentioned, he starts the foreword by saying it's 4 words, which is, I am very lucky. And he always felt lucky. And even when things went wrong, he recovered quickly. When we got to Canada after the film was taken away, he just immediately took up life drawing, studying composition, arranging. He went and had lessons with a surgeon who taught anatomy. And, you know, he had a remarkable resilience and an ability to continue to do fantastic work in quite difficult circumstances. And Prologue, which you're going to see, and I imagine I'm running out of time. Yeah, I'm okay. But Prologue, which you're going to see, was the culmination of everything he'd learned in his life, and was the beginning of a much bigger film about which was based on Lysistrata, which some of you may know, Aristophanes. It's about women who go on a sex strike to stop a war between Sparta and Athens. And Dick took on this project and wanted to do it entirely alone, on 1 sheet of paper for each frame of the film. All the camera moves in Prologue are animated. There are no cuts in the film at all. It's extraordinary and hugely ambitious. And funnily enough, we were in at the festival here, and it would have been about 15 years ago. And we sat down and talked about how he was going to finish this amazing film. And I said, look, you need to get some satisfaction along the way. It's taking you so long. Why don't we do it in chapters? Why don't we do a short film and then another short film and another short film? And that way you'll have the satisfaction of finishing something. So Prologue became its own film, which was the beginning of this bigger film. And Prologue came out in 2015, and as I say, it was nominated for awards. And then Dick got straight to work on the next part of the film, which was actually the women coming together from Sparta and Athens to try and stop the war. Prologue has no dialogue. It is a silent film, but the next film has dialogue, and Dick, myself, and our daughter Natasha did the voices for the second film. It's very much a family affair. And that film wasn't finished before his death. However, I want to make sure that people can see what he did. The work that was done is about the same length as Prologue, and I want to frame it in some way so that people get to see it, because it is truly remarkable. And I think probably at this point we should move on to seeing Prologue.
We do have time very briefly for one question, and I'm and thinking there should be one. Yes, I can already see one. Excellent. Over there. Well, just a second. We need a microphone so everybody can. It's coming.
The animation piece that we see in the theatre before films at Pordenone, that was by your husband, right? Can you talk about that piece? We love it. It's so wonderful.
Yes.
Can you talk about how it was made and his choices?
Yes. It was David Robinson's, who you know was the director some years ago, and it was his 80th birthday. And Dick wanted to give him a present for the Giornata, which we have loved over so many years. So he decided to do a logo, and he started it with he said that the thing about his work was he'd never really done any morphing, you know, turning one thing into another. And he thought this was kind of the point of animation. So he decided to use the logo as a way of doing this morphing. So it's actually, there's a chapter in the book about it. And he actually, he starts with Chaplin, as you know, and then you move through a number of very famous silent stars. And there are quite a few Italians in the middle whose names, I'm sorry, I can't give you. And you end up with Laurel and Hardy, and then, of course, Buster Keaton. And I don't know if you've noticed, but there are actually, some people may have already spotted it, but there are about 2 frames of David Robinson in the logo. Has anyone spotted that? Yeah. And it's just wonderful. It was kind of hidden, and it took a while for people to notice it. And the great thing about it was that no music was put on it, so that every night the musicians could play whatever they wanted to the logo. And you may know that Dick actually, I mean, he was a semi-pro musician, and Gunther here and several others used to regularly bring him in to play with them, which was a great honor for him. He loved the music played at Pordenone and in Bristol when we had a slapstick festival. And he absolutely couldn't believe it when he was asked to join the team of musicians and be part of it. So it was very important to him. And it's fantastic for me to come and see the logo on screen.
Thank you very much, Mo. That was wonderful, and there is such a wonderful gift for the Giornata. We're so excited to have it because every night is different, and that's the beauty of it. So thank you again. We're gonna do a quick switch of book. And so another very, very, very brand new book will arrive by the plane. Oh, thank you so much. There we go. Which is, well, it is already because it just started. So thank you, Jessica, for joining us. The companion of a beautiful, amazing exhibit, which we are all very excited about because we always think about cinema as movies or actors and stars, but there is way more than that. And what is more astonishing than color, I think.
the star of our exhibition is definitely color. So this whole project started about 5 years ago. And you're right, we just opened the exhibition at the Academy Museum in Los Angeles this past Saturday. So it's a brand new book, a brand new exhibition. But the project started about 5 years ago. When in Los Angeles, the Getty Foundation, they have a certain cycle going on of a huge project that is a cross-collaborative project all across Southern California. And they have a specific theme every cycle they do. And the cycle was PSD Art. That's what it's always called, the project. And the theme of the cycle was Arts and Science Collide. So this is when we thought, that's color to me in film history. So the way we thought about color, because it's very hard to think about 130 years of filmmaking in color, you definitely do open Pandora's box. And then the big question is, how do you contain it? How do you organize it in a way that is interesting to people? And we took this theme, science and art, very literal, and thought first about the science part of it, what made color possible, all the long evolution and complicated evolution of color technologies, all the way from hand painting and stenciling to all these different technologies, Kinemacolor and Chronochrome, to Technicolor, to Aquacolor and Eastman color, all the way to digital coloring processes. And we put a special focus on the role of women as producers of color in that history. From the women working at Pathé in the coloring studios, or the colorists of all the Georges Méliès' films, Elisabeth and Bertullier, to Disney's Ink and Paint department. You were talking about Snow White, which was beautiful because in our wonderful Margaret Herrick library, we have beautiful cells from both Flowers and Trees and Snow White, but we couldn't exhibit them because they were on nitrate. So we called up Disney's Ink and Paint department, and it's amazing to see that they still have 4 inkers and painters at Disney, probably the last ones in the world. And they repainted the cells for us. And I talked to the inker. Sorry, I'm sidetracking here because I was inspired by your story. And the person who did the inking, he did a lot of research on it, and he went to the Margaret Herrick Library to look at the original and everything. And he told me, it's crazy what kind of effort they put into the coloring of Snow White. They used 8 different colors just for the inking of the Queen. Wow. This is just for the outlines of the Queen. And he said they didn't know that at Disney, so that was a research result for them as well. And you can only imagine how much labor that was, but also how much creative work that was that the women of Ink and Paint put into that work. We also look at Natalie Kalmus of Technicolor, who influenced so many big Hollywood productions through her dominance and her very decided ideas about color. And we look at leader ladies, and I forgot to mention Loie Fuller at the very beginning with her beautiful serpentine dance, which is probably at home here in Portland, yes. Very much. So this is the science part we looked at. I mean, it already has an artistic part to it. But then we also looked at the art part of it. How do filmmakers employ color to create meaning, to drive a story, to define characters and moods, short as a filmmaking tool. And then we also looked into experimental film artists such as Oskar Fischinger. And I see my former colleagues here from the DFF who have this wonderful Oskar Fischinger collection. And we're really proud that we could recreate Oskar Fischinger's Lumograph for visitors to use in the exhibition and to play with colors and animate colors themselves. So we looked at colors from very distinct angles, and the catalog is trying to do the same. It was supposed to be a scientific, academic catalog with lots of essays by renowned scholars, but it was also supposed to be artistic, like really show off the creative and beautiful side of color.
So you're saying this is an academic book that looks gorgeous.
Exactly.
Which is a rare occasion, ladies
that
and
was
gentlemen.
The goal. That was the goal, yeah, to make it a an academic book that looks gorgeous. Yes, I hope we've succeeded. So the book itself has several parts to it. Essays by scholars. It has visual chapters, so-called visual chapters. We had a really nice side project going on with one of our advisors, Barbara Flueckiger, and she has created with her scan-to-screen technology new multispectral scans of and created like some 75 clips, from which we have created what we call our monochrome film installation, which is a choreographed 3-screen experience. We had a score composed for it, and in the book we have a whole visual chapter dedicated to that. So these films come from 4 different film archives in Europe and America. And we went through great efforts to have them reproduced in the catalog, you know, in a color authentic, or as color authentic as they could be. That is one part. We have another visual chapter on experimental films, again, looking at Oscar Fischinger, Mary Ellen Butte, Len Lai, and others. And then we have color, so what we call color stories, and you can just flip through if you want. Just really focusing on the usage of one specific, oh, here's some images from the monochrome chapter. These are the images that Barbara has created for us. And then we have color stories on specific films, for example, the usage of green in Hitchcock's Vertigo, or red in The Mood for Love, and so on and so forth, to have like interruptions, I want to say, like entertaining interruptions from the large academic essays.
Maybe you can.
Yeah.
Go to the next one.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's an example of green in Vertigo.
So you were also mentioning, again, it is, I think, obvious for everybody here, but I think it's not for the majority of the people. That's what I love to stress, how the history of color in cinema starts from basically day one, mostly.
Day one, and yes, absolutely. And I hope, and I think we just opened it, but our hope was that this will be a huge surprise to the majority of our visitors, because I feel like most people don't realize how big the desire was to bring color to the big screen, how difficult it was, how much work it was. And it was a huge effort. Like, we know this, but I feel like the general public still believes that or films from the silent era were black and white. And so that is, of course, one part that I hope that visitors will take away from the exhibition.
And on that sense, and going also to the scientific part, again, most of the people who has no familiarity with digital things, oh, digital, it's marvelous because we can reproduce everything. And I think most of the people think it's a couple of clicks and then you're done. Why, frankly, whoever done any color grading or even remotely knows how artisanal this still is. We are just using digital tools. But, and that's the main problem, the digital basically brings more than answer a lot of questions and problems, and which is part of the beauty of. And in filmmaking, I wouldn't say it's easier, but at least is a little bit more liberating in the sense you can do things that you don't expect to. In restoration, then we are clashing with many things. Therefore, the knowledge that comes from color, it's so specific that we kind of have a glimpse. And again, you were mentioning the scientific part, which I think is fascinating because we know only so little. And even how some colors are made or can be reproduced in digital is still something we're still figuring out. So I really love what we see here, the idea that you express color in the sense for somebody to be go into the exhibit and be immersed into color.
Exactly. Color is an experience, and we would love for our visitors to experience color with all the senses, like basically the idea of visual music, right? Certainly walk through, feel color, hear color, all of these things. But talking about color or digital color restoration, what I also love in our exhibition, which brings the whole story of Disney and Snow White a little bit full circle, is we worked with a post-production company called Picture Shop And they are the lenders of the digital coloring suite on our what we call the technology wheel. So that technology wheel shows very early color technologies, such as a stenciling table. That I believe that's the only one still in the world. Like all the others have disappeared or were destroyed. So it starts with that, and we go around and we end with the digital coloring suite. And I talked to them about, okay, it's no fun to look at 3 black monitors. Can we record a coloring session? Can we do something about that? And we talked a lot of back and forth of what we could do. And then they told us, oh, you know, we worked with Disney on the color restoration of Snow White for probably the last 5 years. And I was like, that would bring the whole thing full circle. Because also in the book, one of our authors, Kirsten Moana Thompson, speaks about color in American animation, particularly about the scene in Snow White when the queen is creating her spell and she's putting all these colorful liquids in her cauldron, and that kind of creates the magic, right? So that idea that color is something alchemic and something magical and something hard to grasp is also really important. And then I said, like, oh my goodness, this would be amazing because nobody understands, except if you're really an expert, how digital coloring processes work. And so we got permission from Disney to use this, even though the film's not released yet. I think it's going to be released next week or week after. And again, I learned that for none of the restorations has Disney gone through such an effort to correctly color restore a film than Snow White. So it plays a really important role. And we're showing the digital color restoration of Snow White, or that clip on those monitors. So it's really interesting what digital coloring processes can do and how they have changed some things, but also preserved some of the aesthetics. Because if you think about tinting and the monochrome film colors that tinting produced, we began to see those monochrome images again with the arrival of the digital age. So in Blade Runner 2049 or others, we see a lot of monochrome imagery. So even though tinting had been, dead for a while, the aesthetic came back.
Still there. Yeah. And then also on what you mentioned, to the broad spectrum of the book and therefore the exhibit, there is the part devoted to experimental movies, which is fundamental because as we always, when we're thinking of cinema history, for many years we didn't consider experimental movies, or we did consider as something on another planet, on a closer galaxy, let's say. When instead, a lot of experimental artists, either with cameras or other ways, like Oscar Flueckiger, for example, but not, of course, not the only one, did play with either create new instrument or play with color in a way that was not meant to be or completely new.
Of course, I mean, they had absolute freedom, and they were also inventors in their very nature. So bringing this arts and the science together, or the production method and the artistic expression, is probably closest in experimental or animated experimental film. So what we have on display, I really love that object, are Len Lei's stencils, for example, that he's used to apply colors onto the film strip directly, very much like in the early days of stenciling. So that technique has survived in his practice. Oscar Fishinger's beautiful animation drawings are, just incredible to look at. We're also showing the entire film, Kreise, and thinking about how he worked with Bela Gaspar to develop Gaspar color. So these people were deeply involved. And then also there's been an echo in what we think of as more mainstream cinema, how, again, Disney was inspired for Fantasia by the work of experimental film artists, especially Oscar Fischinger, even though they but also looking at the Whitney brothers, or how the Whitneys have influenced certain scenes that we later see in Stanley Kubrick's Stargate sequence, and so on and so forth. There's interrelations everywhere, but with the experimental filmmakers, there's probably the closest connection with their methods of working with color and what they aim to express.
Yeah, so again, there's so many connections that come to mind, but again, they need to be put in words also. So I don't know if you have maybe a temple of content, or you can mention some of the articles there are, because as you said, as we were saying, is academic book. So therefore, there is many aspects from many people wrote about it.
Yes, and if you want to flip through, so these are some of the color stories. Those were all written by the curatorial team. And then we've also contributed essays. This is the essay on animation by Kirsten, Moana, Thompson that I just mentioned. We have interviews about color perception and color science. We're like really asking that simple but very big question, what is color? So this is a conversation with Andrew Stockman, Charles Poynton. This is Sarah Street's essay about the history or the role of women in color. And then we have, oh yeah, that's the visual section for experimental film. So just really beautiful to look at. We have excerpts of Barbara Flueckiger's famous timeline of historical film colors to at least introduce, a few. I mean, there's been so many color technologies, but the most important color technologies. She's also contributed another essay. We have an essay by Joshua Yumibe about, it's called Chromatic Blackness. So really looking at how film stock could or could not capture darker skin tones properly. There's another conversation with representatives of the Chicago Film Society who have done this huge online project on leader ladies, which is really quite interesting to me, because another thing that the general audience never gets to see are all these women that appear in the lead of the film, and only projectionists and people working in the archives or labs are familiar with them, but the general public has probably never even heard of them. So looking at all these different aspects, and they're all reflected in this book.
Thank you very much. Are there any comment or question? Even comments are fine. I know it's brand new.
Could I make a comment?
Yes, please.
I was just going to. You were talking about links and everything linking up, but the Queen in Snow White was animated by Art Babbitt, and there's a whole chapter in my book on Art Babbitt, and he talks about animating the Queen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite amazing how everything like connects in one way or another. Yes.
Well, there is definitely a connection on the two, in the meaning of the technique of animation and the technique of color that goes so long together that actually, as you were mentioning as well, the developing of, let's say, more mainstream color is definitely coming very, very frequently from animation and innovation by animators to be used in mainstream.
Absolutely true. I feel like, as it is true for many major technological breakthroughs, animation is usually at the forefront there, or can be found at the forefront. Yes.
Thank you very much, Jessica.
Thank you.
And the last but not least book we're gonna see today, we're gonna, there we go. Okay. Okay, so we are extremely happy to have Luisa with us. Thank you so much. Luisa Malzoni from Cinemateca Brasileira. I'm going to point out one thing as well, that these books are a little bit expensive, are they, Luisa? They come for free.
Wow.
And they're beautiful as well. So you will find copy at the Filmfair in Portuguese, but of course there is an English version who's coming along. Is it already? It's already ready, yes. So you can also have that. And again, it is very important because it is a beautiful book. It talks about something that we have, I'm talking for myself, no idea or little idea about, and is very technical because It goes into details of how techniques of colors were used in the silent era, etc. But it also goes to an entire process, how to restore and trying to go back as much as possible in the photochemical and digital, which is spectacular.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank Paolo Tosini for the opportunity. I'm Luisa. I'm a film restorer at Cinemateca Brasileira. And we have just edited this book about the color restoration of silent cinema in Brazil. We launched it on July, so it's really new. We were lucky to do this book in a non-profit project. That's why it's distributed. The book is the result of my research at the School of Communication and Arts of the University of São Paulo, under the supervision of Professor Eduardo Moretin. And it is closely related to my experience as a technician at Cinemateca Brasileira, where I've been working since 2005. The main focus of the book are the nitrate films with tinting and toning and the Desmet method of restoration. I would love to thank also Noel Desmet, who is here today. Thank you for being here. As everybody knows, Noel Desmet is a pioneer restorer and the creator of this innovative method that has made possible to recreate the color of films with tinting and toning. We have welcomed him into our restoration lab in Brazil, in São Paulo, in 2008, starting a period of exchange marked by knowledge transfer and technical cooperation. So during this process, it became clear that the acquired experience should be documented in order to consolidate all the knowledge we received, but also to enable other technicians and other institutions, especially in Brazil, to benefit from it. We also, in the book, wanted to discuss how restoration techniques are essential to film archives, and why and how they should be preserved and documented, just like we do with films. So we should take care not only of the films, but of these important techniques. So I'll talk a little bit about the chapters. So before taking a closer look at the Desmet method, we can go to the next photo. The first chapter is dedicated to identifying and cataloging the color process in silent cinema. We will address many processes, such those with applied colors, like hand coloring, stencil, tinting and toning, but also subtractive systems of natural color process, like those we will see in the next slide. I think we tried to use in the book most of the time pictures from Brazilian films. Sometimes we couldn't, so we asked from other archives. But we have lots of films colored, nitrate colored, and with many processes. So, and one thing I think it's difficult in Brazil is to know exactly how to catalog them. So it was really something we wanted to do. So the main object was really emphasize practical ways to differentiate and catalog them. We try to do like a manual. It's not an easy task, especially when films are deteriorated. There is one with some draws. I think it's before here. We were really lucky to have these beautiful illustrations made specially for the book by a colleague, Felipe Castro, and it helped us a lot to understand so many different processes. So the second chapter we will focus on the technical aspects of the Desmet method and its application to 2 Brazilian films. Brasa Dormida, that we made on our restoration lab in 2008, and Brasil Pitoresco, Viagens de Cornélio Pires, undertaken in Cinemateca Portuguesa in 2009, which I was able to observe during my internship there. I will speak really briefly about the Desmet method. I don't know if everybody knows about it, but after you can ask questions for me or for Noel, but I will speak really briefly about it, okay? It's perfect, this image. So before the creation of this method, the films colored by tinting and toning were only duplicated in color film stock. And this was a problem because the color film stock is really expensive. And after some years, the colors faded, and we didn't have a material for preservation. So what Noel did, can we go to the anterior? Yeah, the one we were, this one. So here we can see a little bit about what the method is about. I will talk about. So what Noel did was to propose to duplicate these films with color into a black and white internegative, instead of using a color negative. Besides being less expensive, it is a much more stable material. So we can see there in the first image, a simulation of the Desmet method trying to restore a tinting scene with pink tinting, right? So this black and white internegative will be the matrix for the Desmet print, which now is made on color film stock. To reproduce the tinting, the print will be exposed 2 times. The first one, the image is exposed in the color film, ensuring that it remains as neutral as possible, because it's a color print. Then the film will be exposed again a second time, and this time only with a flash of pink light to simulate the pink tinting. And here we can see, to reproduce the toning, he proposes to duplicate this black and white internegative to the color print, but this time unbalancing the light, so we can color the image like simulating the toning. I don't know if everybody knows, but in a printing machine, we have 3 light valves with the primary lights, red, green, and blue. And if we use the same intensity in the 3 colors, we have a white light. So if we unbalance them, we have a colored light. So like this, we can simulate a toning color. So in the next picture, we can see some images of the book. For example, here, choosing the color of the second exposure of the print with magenta and yellow filters. And in the next one, we can see the test to reproduce the metallic toning on Noel's method. And we can see the numbers that Noel gave us to make these colors. And this is the second chapter. And in the third chapter, we can go to the next one. So in 2010, Cinemateca Brasileira acquired an scanner, and we had the opportunity to digitize many Brazilian tinted and tone films. And we described this experience in the third chapter, discussing its possibilities and challenges. And we will also examine the application of the Desmet method to digital processing, known as digital Desmet. Well, digitize color films is a very challenging work, and the Noel Desmet method really can help to have better results. And the work of the Diaster project was really important for this chapter, and also directly influenced our work, our daily work at the Cinemateca Brasileira. In the book, we will talk about technical issues such as scanner parameters, different light sources, and ways to create references images for color grading of digital materials. We were really influenced by Barbara Flueckiger, and we could do some photos with collimated light, and we had very good results. We tried to do some digital desmet with some films, and it was really interesting. The next one, please. We will show lots of examples in the book of the diversity in different light sources through comparative images. And can you show the next one? Sorry. Here we can see a simulation, what would be a digital desmet. So like Noel do on film, we desaturate the digital material, and then we do the color in post-production. So it's difficult to talk about this because there are lots of technical information, but sometimes if we don't do this, it's very difficult to reproduce the real color of the films. So this technique really helps. In the appendices of the book, we can go to next. We could interview 3 restorers who played key roles in this book. So we have an interview with Noel Desmet, Patrícia de Filippi, and Luigi Pintarelli. Patrícia de Filippi was my coordinator in the lab when I started doing the Desmet method, and she will talk about how she decided to start using the Desmet method, the challenges she faced, but she also, there's a very nice part that she describes when she recreated the original tinting and toning recipes. So before doing the Desmet method, she had this experience in the 80s, and she could do the original recipes. Interviewing Noel Desmet was essential for this book. He recounts his professional journey, the paths that led him to film restoration, and how he created his method. But he also describes the challenges he faced along the way, the first reactions, and its receptions in the subsequent years. We had a lot of help from Luigi Pintarelli and Cinemateca Portuguesa. And in the interview, Luigi described his experience as a restorer in Italy and Portugal. And he elucidates how to identify color processes in deteriorated films. I think it's important to say that I was really fortunate to carry this research when at the same time Cinemateca Brasileira was developing the nitrate film project. It was a big project that started in 2023, involving all sectors of the archive in order to preserve, restore, and disseminate our collection of nitrate films. Can I see? There is the next one, uma tabela. Working the preservation of the color cinema in this period was really rewarding. We had the opportunity to introduce new procedures like cataloging coloring process with more precision and making this information available in database. So now in Brazil, if a researcher wants to know the process and the colors of the films, he can go to the website, and we could do this with all our collection. It was a big work, lots of people involved, but it was really, really rewarding. Just to finish, I would like to say that by describing this experience, we wanted to address the possibilities of preservation and the restoration of those tinted and toned films, but also discuss uh, how the different preservation approaches and possibilities influence the experience of who is watching the movies. So why is it so important to preserve these techniques and to be transparent about what kind of film we are seeing, what kind of restoration was done, so we can understand exactly what we are seeing and know a little bit more preservation and restoration. I think it's about this. It's really a technical book. It's supposed to be like a manual for other institutions. I think it's this.
Thank you, Luisa. I don't know. I don't know if there are already some comment or question, because I do have one anyway. So maybe I will have the first one and see if there are more. It is, as you were going through the entire book, it was very interesting to see, as we were saying at the beginning, how it's not only about color, but the process and integrated with digital. But I do really appreciate the three interview, not one, three interview at the end, because that kind of knowledge that is definitely personal, it's the one that we usually lost very quickly, very easily. We are losing all this information. Even right now, for photochemical lab, we lost so much, and it's so hard to keep it together. But then again, on the more, let's say, artistic part, in your opinion, what did you see that color, how was it used in Brazil? Meaning you have experience with, of course, other country and other use. And so I'm curious to know if there was a pattern, or of course there are many directors, many movies, things can change. But if you see something that was unique of Brazil in that sense.
This is a very good question, but I think more than a different color or maybe I don't have experience to say that, but what I can say about differences in my country, it's a very interesting story that when we acquired a nice scanner, we took like more than a year to it really work. And we couldn't know why. And the technicals used to come and try to fix it, and they couldn't. And we didn't know why. We acquired a very expensive equipment, and we couldn't scan our films. So we went to Munich with a very deteriorated film, a nitrate film, and we tried to scan them there. And the same thing as happened in Brazil happened in Munich. So it wasn't a machine problem, but what we discovered is that our films were deteriorating a little bit different from other countries. So this was really interesting. And they came back and they had to make some adjustments in our machine. And for example, our films were really humid, and it gets stuck in the gate. So they had to make a new gate for us, a little bit with a little bit more of space. And they had to we used to lose the loops, so they have to put a sensor, and when we lose a loop, it will start again. So I think this experience was really nice, and I think for my experience, I think this is the differences I see is more like what kind of degradation and deterioration. But about the color, I know more the Brazilian films, so I don't know how to answer that.
It is an answer, because of course, when we're talking about colors today that are 1 year olds, we're not going to go back to the original, which at this point is gone or gone-ish. So that part of degradation is part of the color today, and therefore, yes, absolutely. I don't know if there is any question or comment, even a quick one, a last quick one. Oh, yes, please.
Hi. Yes, it's actually a question to Noel. What do you think about digital Desmet and about the name?
Aha.
I must say, in the last 15 years, I haven't seen very much films. So the digital Desmet, I know that they call it like that. I don't know in what degree they correct the colors as it should. I know that the technique is there that first they have to create a black and white image, and then on top of it make another color, the tint. I haven't seen that really that much films on Digitismet yet. I hope to see some, but I cannot really. When you don't see the original, you cannot say, "Oh, that's not good." You have to see the original, and then you can judge if the digital is all right. You know, you have to know what the originals look like. For the toning, well, there it's quite easy, and the toning and tinting combined, it's the same thing. Only you have to know in what degree color changes. The toning, if it fades, in what degree how it fades. For example, Prussian blue, when it's fading, it becomes darker. At the end, it's almost a black and white image. So if you don't know that, you cannot recreate that Prussian blue like it is in the beginning, because when you do it chemically, like I have done, it's really a bright colored image, the Prussian blue. I know that even with my method, some labs, they try to recreate the image that they see on the film. But in fact, they shouldn't do that. They should recreate a bright blue colored image, and then they can do whatever they want with it, you know? Does that answer your question? Okay.
Thank you very much. I don't know if there is a last question for the old panel about all the other books, or just a comment, or not, and there can be for later on. Well, we're gonna enjoying during the fest. Sì, sì.
Stavo pensando, se si volesse fare un film futuristico con dei flashback degli anni 20, degli anni 10, 20 e 30, volevo sapere i flashback in che colore la signora consiglierebbe di farli, insomma.
Per chi
Se
è
color
la
sepia
domanda?
in bianco e nero. Per la
Luisa?
signora. Sì, grazie.
Okay. So the question is, if somebody would like to do like a futuristic style, you know, the Italian futuristic, generally speaking.
Futurist film?
Yes. And do it in kind of a flashback. So what kind of color should be used in this kind of futuristic, something easy to answer. What would it be your idea? What suggestion, which kind of colors to be using?
I think you can help me in this question also.
I think so.
Well, I think she's better than me to answer this question, but it's not easy to say how the color were used. It really depends on the film, of course. And in the interviews with Noel and Luigi, they always say that when they have the opportunity to see two prints of the same title, they used to have different colors. So it's not easy to say they always use red when it's a danger scene, or they use blue when it's night, because it depends. But there are some things that we can see that are used to appear in the films, like blues with night, red for danger, and amber for lights inside the house. But I think the color, I think it's more beautiful. It's the combination of pink tinting and blue toning. It's really classical, and I think it's really beautiful. What do you think?
I agree, and I think you're more of an expert on that than I am. I can just say for tinting, there's always these surprises, right? We saw some underwater clips from Venus of the South Seas, and they were bright yellow. And you would assume that these would be some kind of bluish tone, but no, they were not. But when you talk about just the aesthetic, and when you talk about something that you see now very much in digital coloring technologies, when you look at otherworldly scenarios, they often use the amber orangey tones for these scenarios. I don't know if that answers your question, but
È una
that's
risposta sufficiente. Quindi ci sono opzioni. There's option for everybody. That's the good of it. Okay. Sì. Perfetto. So thank you, everybody.
Could I
Thanks
just
so much.
say
Yes,
a
please.
quick word? I'm sorry, but the books at Filmfair of Adventures in Animation have all been sold. And I just wanted to say, if any of you bought one, I'm more than happy to sign it. And anyone who would like to get a copy, the easiest way is to go to amazon.co.uk, who seem to ship all over the world very, very quickly. So that is where it would be available.
There is another comment.
Okay, I only wanted about the color, which color which we should correct, and which color. You have to understand the production of the tinting at the time. You know, all the scenes of the same color were put together. They came through a machine in a bath, for example, for amber. In the beginning, the first scenes who came into that bath were really amber. The last, after 600 meters, for example, they were quite lighter, but they weren't supposed to have the same color. Afterwards, they were put together, you know, yellow, amber, green, etc. For the pre-tinted films that they sold, for example, for Kodak, Gevard, they had samples. So you can use these samples to see which color it really was. So, but I had, at the time, I had films with, for example, amber, with different degree of coloring. I did it all the same color because I knew that the technique to produce these copies was like that, you know, that in the beginning of the bath, who was full strength, they had heavy colors. At the end, they were a little bit lighter. So it was not really the idea of the director or the producer to have a lighter color. Okay? Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, to add, so that's the combination of what was the original idea, what was the technical result of it, and what we think about it, right? Okay. There was a question from online, which is where we can get all the books. So if you want to answer on that, where we can buy it, aside from here from our film fair.
Okay, so amazon.co.uk for Adventures in Animation.
Or your favorite library, bookshop in which you can order.
Yeah, so a local bookshop, my local bookshop's stocking them, and lots of local bookshops are stocking them, or even somewhere like Waterstones.
Yeah.
Our book was co-published with DelMonico, so they're also doing the international distribution, and it's coming to Europe, or should be in European bookstores by November 21st, the latest. It's already in American bookstores now.
We brought some copies of our book in Portuguese, so if anybody's interested, you can go to the film fair and take one. But we also have online versions in Portuguese and English in Cinemateca Brasileira website.
Thank you very much, and thank you, everybody.
I'm not technical. I'm sorry. But I thought you were